All right, we're ready. I see it. Okay, so I've got to read this first because of this type of meeting, so bear with me. Pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12th, 2020 order, suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, general laws, chapter 30A, section 18, and the governor's March 15th, 2020 order imposing strict limitation on the number of people that may gather in one place. This meeting of the Southborough Advisory Committee will be conducted via remote participation to the greatest extent possible. Specific information and the general guidelines for remote participation by members of the public and or parties with the right and or requirement to attend this meeting can be found on the Town of Southborough's website at www.southboroughtown.com. For this meeting, members of the public who wish to watch or participate in the meeting may do so in the following manner. By finding the meeting at www.southboroughtown.com /remote meetings. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings in real time via technological means. In the event that we are unable to do so, despite best efforts, we will post on Southborough's website an audio or video recording, transcript, or other comprehensive record of proceedings as soon as possible after the meeting. All right. We're not going to approve minutes today. This is going to be a pretty quick meeting, just so everybody knows. We'll get caught up on meeting minutes next week when you've got a chance to look at them. So chairman's update first. Okay, so as hopefully everybody knows at this point, the annual town meeting is now scheduled for June 13th, which is Saturday at 1 o'clock at Trotter. They are going to make an effort to make sure that we comply with social distance rules. So they're going to use other spaces in the school besides the auditorium. We will be spaced appropriately, and we will have some type of radio walkie-talkie so we can talk to each other through that, so we can communicate during the meeting. The moderator plans to propose a consent agenda like we did last year for the first time to pass articles that are perfunctory and or routine. He's then going to propose that we deal with articles that need passing before July 1st, which is mainly our budget and anything related to the budget article. Any other articles would then potentially be on the warrant for the fall special, including the meals tax article. And that is assuming that town meeting agrees to that. They've got to agree to it, but that's what the plan is currently. Things are still changing too. Things have been changing pretty fast, but that's at least what the plan is as of today. Quorum changes. So there is a proposed change in the law as far as quorums for this purpose. Our quorum right now in Southborough is 100, but this law, if it passes, would reduce the potential quorum to 10% of our 100. So we could actually do a meeting with 10 people. That's not going to apply to every single article. It's going to apply to only certain things. The moderator would be the person who actually decides on how he wants to apply the new quorum. He could keep it at 100 or he could reduce it to something less, but not all the way down. So that's still pending as far as I know. And I did talk to Jim Haggerty a couple hours ago, so I think that's still the case as far as that goes, because obviously people worried that we're not going to get a quorum on June 13th because of the virus. People who always come tend to be in the most at-risk group, and so they just may say, I'm not doing it. We will not consider any other articles from now until town meeting other than the ones that are expected to be discussed and voted on at the annual town meeting. We had already reviewed and voted on most of the articles before the virus. It's expected that the ones we didn't vote on, the plastic ban, noise bylaw, etc., will not be considered at annual town meeting. Additionally, the most controversial non-budget warrant article, the funding of the repairs to the St. Mark's Church Tower, will not be considered at annual town meeting. So the hope is that we're going to have a very quick annual town meeting and get out of there and then get ready for the fall special. The Capital Planning Committee is up and running and it's met several times. The focus for now has been to listen to departments explain their long-term capital plans, short-term and long-term, for the next year and focus on the near-term items for fiscal year 21. So both Andrew, Pat, and I are on that committee. And so we've been meeting every week and a couple cases twice a week to get as much done as we can before town meeting. And so far, the committee has not done anything differently than what we voted on for the most part as far as capital goes. So there's nothing earth shattering as far as what's been done so far. Andrew, let me know if you disagree. We need to recruit more advisory members pretty quickly. At a future meeting, I intend to ask advisory to discuss and debate whether we want to formally request a reduction of the committee size to 7 from 9, and do that at the special town meeting. So kind of keep that in the back of your mind. Mr. Haggerty asked me to encourage everyone to take advantage of the ability to vote early by mail. And if you just go to the town website, it will tell you how to do it. So they want us to do it. They want us to pass it on so we can get as much done by mail instead of in person. The election is on June 16th. At least currently. All right, so we're going to move right into the budget now. So now I have sent everyone an email in the last few minutes that I don't expect you to look at right now, but it's to look at between now and next week, which is when we're going to meet again. It's the most up-to-date budget spreadsheet, the same spreadsheet we saw before the virus hit, that's been updated for a few things. So what I am going to do right now is try to share my screen with you so you can see. I don't think that's working. All right, so I'm going to tell you, let's get over, I'm showing to you my screen. So the spreadsheet I sent you, if you look at the very first tab, when you have a chance to, it's labeled budget adjustments through 5/11/20. So there's been several things that have changed since we met last, and the net result to the proposed budget is positive. It's about a $300,000 swing in bottom line. So the tax rate right now, the proposed year-over-year tax rate increase is 2.46%. The items that have changed are items that we, in some cases, had issues with. So they've actually changed and changed in a way that we were hoping they would. So there's nothing here that is going to be upsetting to us, I don't think. So the first thing is Brian Ballantyne has withdrawn his request for half a person. That's the only change in the proposed budget as far as new people. So he's withdrawn his request. Norfolk, instead of having 2 students, they're only going to have 1. So that cut that quite a bit, $44,000. The EDC, remember we talked about their budget a lot because they had a proposed really big year-over-year increase. They reduced that by $8,000. So it's at least in the ballpark now as far as a reasonable rate of increase. Let's see what else. The library interior, we already knew this, that they, at least I did. John Parent had said that he did not want the library interior to be done in fiscal year 21. They wanted to get the roof done first. So it didn't hurt new carpet and stuff like that. So that's been postponed 1 year. Library has actually voted on a new budget, and I'll tell you why in a second. So their budget has now gone down by $22,000. A couple things have been moved as far as the way they're going to be paid for, so it won't come out of the tax levy. And those are the Lucas device that Chief Achilles wants for the fire department. Remember, there was 2. One was being leased, and so he's going to pay for that through the money that he gets from the Harvard bookstore. And then the other one is going to be moved to the ambulance fund, so it won't affect the tax levy, the real estate tax levy. They're also going to move the entire debt service for the ambulance that we bought a couple years ago. Excuse me, the fire truck we bought a couple years ago to the ambulance fund. Let's see. The hook truck is now going to be bonded that Karen Gallagher wants instead of paid for upfront. And then there are several things on the capital list that are being either delayed or eliminated. So those are the positive adjustments. And you'll see these when you look at these spreadsheets, the very first tab as far as the details go. Those total $638,000 as far as a positive influence on the budget. The negative ones are basically virus related. So Brian has reduced what he may get, or what we may get from the state for local aid by $155,000. And he doesn't know what the number is. He says that's his best guess at this point. No one knows because the state still doesn't know how this is all going to turn out as far as their finances go. But he's assuming we're going to take a hit because the state's taking such a big He's also reduced what we call local receipts, which is our car excise taxes. It is transfer station stickers. It would have been the meals tax if we passed that. It's the interest income we get on the bank accounts that we have, et cetera. So he's reduced that by $165,000. And the only other thing that is going to affect the budget is there's a proposal to add a bathroom to Cortical Hall. Remember when Bill Harrington and his group came that they wanted to expand the front and then also add bathrooms. So apparently for $25,000, we can add a bathroom. And John Parent is going to coordinate the building of that. So that's his number. And he says we can do it for $25,000. So there's nothing in the budget right now as far as the other things they want to do to that building. This is it. It's $25,000 to get them a new bathroom in fiscal year 21. All right. So I'll stop right there and see if there's any questions on the changes since we met last, which seemed like it was 2 years ago. So I can't hear Andrew.
Not muted, so
Well,
can you hear me
now
now?
I can hear you now. Yeah.
So I think, did you say that the meals tax is not going to be considered at the June town meeting?
I didn't say that.
Okay.
Oh, yes, I did. Yes, I did. And it will not be considered at the annual town meeting. The question is, do we think it belongs on the special warrant? And so that hasn't been decided yet. I have a feeling there's going to be some folks that think that it shouldn't just because of the environment. They may think it just doesn't look good to talk about adding taxes on restaurants that are struggling so much.
Okay.
As it, you know.
Okay.
So we will talk about it again. I don't know what we think. So that's not on the table for June. It's not off the table for September, but it's not on either. So we will have to discuss that before we get to discussion.
Hey, Kathy, one of the questions or concerns that I've had throughout is whether or not, or our tendency to look at this budget in a microcosm and its impact in the next 2 or 3 years. Are we pushing more than we should off to keep the tax rate low with the expectation that in a couple of years, the tax rate's going to be significantly higher?
I don't want to answer that yes or no. I want to talk about that. Everything I mentioned, except for the hook truck and the delayed capital, only affects the current year operational budget. So I think the answer is no to that first part, to the first 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 things.
Yep.
But it's probably yes, a little bit to the last two, because the hook truck is being pushed. There's other things that are being pushed based on the conversations that capital planning has had with the department that needs whatever it is. So I think it's a partial yes and a partial no. But we're going to come back to capital and talk about that. Okay. All right. Anybody else before I go on?
No, one question though, Kathy, for town meeting, we actually have to vote at town meeting to postpone stuff to the fall meeting, right?
That's correct. So I'm assuming we're not going to consider all this stuff. The town meeting has to agree that we're not going to do this. So you're exactly right. If somebody comes in and just determined to have something discussed and that person prevails, and it won't be postponed.
Okay, just wanted to make sure how it worked.
So Kathy, does it make sense for us to at least hear from the proponents of the articles that we haven't, so that we can be prepared to take a position if somebody were to not push it to the fall?
I think there's only one that falls in that category, Chelsea. I'll double check that, but I believe it's the noise reduction bylaw. So I think the answer there is we should talk to the proponent and see if he has agreed. For example, the proponents of the plastics ban have agreed it's fine for the fall. So they're not going to raise their hand and say, I want to hear that one, right? So I think the only one that is major is the noise bylaw. I'm pretty sure EDC has agreed to, in fact, I know they have, they said there's going to be fall. So I think the one that would be substantive would be the noise bylaw. So I think we should talk to Peter Lapine and ask him if he has officially agreed that he will be fine with it being considered in September or October, whenever we have it. We don't know when the special is going to be. So yes, Chelsea, I think we should make sure that what I said is accurate. Andrew?
One other thing that I think fits in the category of, stuff that's potentially controversial, but has a budget aspect to it. The CPC articles, and this is a question I ask because I don't know the answer. Is there some timing requirement aspect to that so that if we didn't vote on that you would miss the opportunity to spend funds that are available now for CPC projects? Or does that kind of roll over to the next year?
I understand, it's my understanding that, and Brian and Mark are both here, so we may need to get them to join us. It's my understanding that CPC is fine with their articles being considered in the fall, which to me means it all still works. But I don't know enough to be able to answer what you said and tell you exactly why. I'm just relying on what they have said, because
Okay.
if that weren't the case,
Kathy.
yeah, go ahead.
There wouldn't be any loss of funds due to timing. The monies would simply flow into their proper buckets as long as the obligated bond payments are made on time. That's all we'd have to worry about.
So maybe, okay, I'm gonna back up. I think the one thing they are gonna do is have the bond payments approved at annual town meeting. Tim, does that sound right? So we'll
Yes.
have those approved, and that's it. Then everything else can be pushed to the fall. So I'm correct in what I said. I do believe they are going to do the piece they have to do before July 1st.
And Andrew, one of the things we talked about in Capital Committee was trying to talk to CPC on like the town hall windows, whether or not maybe that would be one that we could put up for a comparison against the other proposals at the fall town meeting. So kind of give people more options.
All right. Okay, so now let's go to the budget itself. Okay, so on May 9th, Mark Purple sent each of you a email that had several spreadsheets attached to it. So what the Board of Selectmen asked Mark and Brian to do is to basically prepare a mock budget that ask each department to go back and show what their department would look like for fiscal year 21 if they came up with a year-over-year increase of 2% and then 0%. And he left it up to the departments to determine how to do it. They didn't say, they didn't tell them how to do it. They asked them to say, if you had to do it, what would you change? So everyone has submitted that except for a really big one, which is K through 8. So it's kind of hard to look at till you get K through 8, and we expect to have K through 8 pretty soon. So I would get the K through 8 out because I really don't even want you to look at till you get K through 8 because that could make a big difference. But K through 8 has said they are going to do it. So there will be a submission by them. Algonquin, even though it was already, we had a negative assessment already in the budget of 2%. That may go down even further because it looks like Northborough may be pushing on them a little bit to get their overall budget down because the assessment to Northborough was still so high. So that may even come down a little bit more. So we're missing a big piece. You need to really look at this holistically and philosophically because I don't know, right now it's 2.46%, but we've got a horrible environment financially. So I don't know what each of you thinks. Do you think we should go negative? Are you happy with 2.46%? Something in between? And to John's question, are we just making the next 5 years worse by doing this? So all this needs to be considered, which is why I wanted to give you time. I wanted to set it up and frame it and then give you the next week to really think about how you look at the world. For example, you're going to see when you start looking at what the departments have proposed for 0 and 2%, and in some cases they propose asking people to take unpaid leave to get to that budget. So you may say, I don't like that. That doesn't sound right. Doesn't sound fair. We haven't. I don't remember anybody ever having done that or asked to do that. To date, as far as I know, and I'm sure Mark will correct me if I say this wrong, I don't think anyone has been either furloughed or laid off, even in the school system with schools being closed. So that's where we are today, I believe. I'm not sure if that is going to change at some point, but I think that's kind of what the goal is, not to do that. But you'll see in some of these budgets that the proposal to get down to 0 and 2 would include actually asking people to take unpaid leave to get them to where they need to. For example, the rec budget, that's a good one to talk about. It's nothing but salaries. So what are you going to cut? You're going to cut salaries. So they had no choice but to implement their 0 and 2 by taking salaries out and asking their employees to take off some time and not be paid for it. All right.
So Kathy,
Yes.
so I had a chance to look at this a little bit, and while I appreciate the approach that was taken to ask each of the departments to find their own way to get to a certain number, you can't help but notice that, especially on the 0% sheet, the impact is drastically different between departments.
Are you saying it's different between the 2 and 0 for a department, or it's drastically different among departments? So that
Particularly on the 0% sheet, it looks like some departments getting to that number are impacted significantly more than other departments. And you know, to reference what you had said earlier, asking people to be unpaid or to take leave versus, you know, I don't want to harp on something we've already talked about, but moving from a full-time to a part-time to save money. It just seems to me that doing this in you know, asking everybody to get to the same 0% is not having an equitable impact across the board.
So are you, another way to say that, are you saying that a 0% year-over-year increase on a department like Youth and Family Services, which has a very low budget, is going to be a lot more consequential than it would be on DPW, which has a much bigger budget and probably has some room to find some things that Youth and Family Services couldn't find?
Well, to use your example, I would say, you know, like the Youth Commission, going from 1 full-time to 2 part-time, as we talked about, there's an inherent savings there. So functionally, they still get what they need, but a lot of the savings is built in. And so the impact is actually less.
Okay, so you're looking at a little bit different. I was trying to pick a big one and a small one, so I wasn't trying to pick on either one of them. I just know years ago, when we would go through this exercise where we tell people to do, you know, level service budget and then a level budget, don't increase from year to year. And it always seemed like the small departments really got hit because they didn't have much to cut. So they would cut things that they really needed. And where the bigger ones had some room to cut things that they didn't need quite as much as the smaller departments did.
Right, and I see that point too. You know, honestly, I'm really focusing on column I, which is mostly the impact of people. And you'll see that there are several departments where they list there's no impact, even on a cut for 0%. Whereas you see others that are listed with, you know, specifically the building inspector, 40 hours unpaid. That's a difficult cut, right? Yep. Asking certain people to cut their hours back, you don't know what impact that has for their own family. And so I don't know that saying everybody needs to get to a certain benchmark is the best way to go, because the impacts that I'm seeing are of varying severity from one department to the next. That's the only point I wanted to make.
Andrew?
I just had a chance to look at the spreadsheet really quickly as we were looking at this, but for the if you look at the column I, where some of them are none, is it the case that a good number of those are ones where they get to 0% by just not requesting things that they had pitched to us before they had a good case for, and they'll forgo? Like I think MIS is one of them, right? Where MIS, no impact. And in item B, they had a new request for 26,000. I think that was for the part-time. Was that for the part-time position?
Yes. Yes.
And so they'll just do without that for a year. So that's how they have the no impact, right? So that's still,
No.
It says none, but it's not really no impact. That means, for example, Tom goes another year.
No.
Okay, all right, I didn't read it right.
Not in that specific case. Go ahead, Chelsea.
So they left all the positions in, and then in that specific example, MIS was able to cut somewhere else and keep the part-time position in order to get to the exercise results.
So Chelsea, will you
Contracted
describe for
services
everybody?
or something like that, maybe.
Yeah, I think there's some upgrades
Okay.
that were cut, and I think he was able to kind of figure that out.
So
Without,
Chelsea, will you describe for the 2% and the 0% what they did with the new positions, just to be clear? The
sure.
proposed new position?
So the new positions that were in the current proposed, and Kathy already talked about one of them that was removed by the finance director. So that's not even in this list. That was the treasurer collector position. So that's not in column B. But the new positions were 2 police officers and a full-time youth and family and a part-time MIS. In the 2% proposed, all of those positions are present as originally requested. In the 0%, police took 1 full-time position out. MIS left their part-time position, so that's no change. And youth and family went from a full-time to 2 part-time positions, so you eliminate the benefits there.
So just to reiterate this, Brian Ballantyne removed his request before they did the 2 and the 0. It's out with that 2.46 year over year. So your spreadsheet that the workbook I just sent you the email where RevCap is your main tab, that is already out of there. So that was not something that was done to get to the 2 and the 0. He already removed that before they ever started the exercise of doing the 0 and the 2.
Kathy, aren't we going to want to know what the impact is on the delivery of services with respect to this 0% exercise? I mean, isn't that an important component? Like, for instance, there'd be no new police officer. And
well, there would be 1 new one in the 0 and 2 in the, so he would get, if he went down to, if Chief Pulse went down to 2%, he would still have them both. And if he went down to the 0%, went down to 0%, which means probably I know it does, it means a negative year over year tax increase, then he would still have 1. So he hasn't eliminated them both in any scenario. He's went down to 1 if he has to cut it to the same budget as last year or this year. But I still can't answer your question, John, so that I can answer the easy part to it. I don't think that anyone has gone as far as what you just said, which is really understanding what it means, department by department, because I don't see how else you could do it, understanding what it means to make the cuts that are in those 0s and 2s. In some cases, it's things like training. But I mean, as Chelsea and I were talking the other day, there are times that people really need to be trained. And so you don't want to see it cut if they really need it to do their job and keep up with what's going on.
yeah, and I was the liaison to the senior center when we were doing the budget presentations, and they had, I think we all understand, they had already submitted what they considered was, what their so-called bare bones request. And I just don't know what the impact is without circling back with them, if ultimately they were required to come up with a 0% increase. But I have to assume it's going to impact various types of programs and services within Pam's authority that, I do think we need to know the impact associated with the straight math, if you will.
All right, so this is what I'll do, probably a little bit of help. I will not only send you what I have promised to send you, which is kind of a cliff notes for every department to make sure it's clear what got cut, so you don't have to do it yourself when it's not people. But I will talk to every department, or someone will, and understand what it really means for that to be cut out.
Yeah, I don't think you should take that full responsibility unless you want to. I mean,
I said I'll
I
get
have no
help.
problem
I'll get help.
Okay.
I'll get help.
Okay.
Kathy, if I may. So I've actually, John, started that process by meeting with individual departments. I've spent a lot of time looking at the data. And I think there's a few ways that we could go about looking at this. I think I think that we don't know what the world's going to look like kind of when we come out of this. And if we're also going to have a reoccurrence in the fall, that's going to impact how we, how we were living before. So I think when we're talking about program delivery and that kind of thing, I think it's still a fluid situation where we don't know what kind of programs are going to be offered. I also think that, in some way or another, people's jobs are getting affected by this. And I think we all know that people are getting told, there's going to be no raises, no cash, no bonuses for, residents living in Southborough. So I think we need to keep that in mind as we kind of go through this exercise. I also think that there's probably a list of items that are on the 2% and the 0% that could be cut, and that Mr. Purple has said publicly in the BOS meetings that maybe we should keep it in and then cut it if we have a fall town meeting. I think we need to be careful if we take that approach, because I think that if we have it in and approve it in the spring town meeting, then we need to have some pretty good discipline that we don't spend it between July and whenever we have the special town meeting. So I think, things like conferences, travel, I think those are things that we could look at, that we could recommend. Maybe we don't put it in this budget because we don't know that they're going to happen in the fall or next spring or whenever it is. So I think we could go through. I have a list of areas that I think we could task the finance department with looking at. And I think one easy thing off the bat is, do we look at what we could do for freezing wages for the employees, either for the whole year or for the half of year? And that way we're not dipping into things that are going to impact the level of service that we would get for the town.
Yeah, but I think also, I mean, aren't we contractually obligated for certain salaries? You talk about the union contracts. I don't think we're going to be able to touch those.
And we're not talking about that. We're talking about the SAP, possibly contractual employees, and that's not that much money. And when you put it together, anyway, it's less.
But John's right. You would. I mean, I think you probably would want to look at it though across the board, so that way everyone's kind of dealing with the same hit, right? And that would be looking at the union contracts.
But Chelsea, we're not going to reopen the union contracts unless the unions agree to reopen those contracts. So that would be a pretty big nut to crack, especially between now and town meeting.
Let me ask you this, Kathy and Chelsea. I mean, do we anticipate that there will be certain departments who, as a result of having to implement these social and physical distancing requirements, their budgets requests may actually increase? And I'm thinking of, for instance, schools. How are they going to deal with, will they need additional classrooms? Will they need additional teachers as a result of compliance with these guidelines? I mean, is that all being analyzed and thought about in terms of, when you talk about a 0 or 2% budget increase? There could be some significant increases associated with compliance with regulations.
You're right, and they are looking at it. I've got a call set with the superintendent Friday to talk about where they are. They are looking at it. They just had to spend so much time figuring out how to educate kids,
right,
that this wasn't at the top of their list. But they're talking about it now. Mark's talking to them. So yeah, you're right. It could go the other way, right? You're thinking things. Well, they don't have the need for janitors right now on cleaning every night. The cafeteria staff should not need to be robust because all they're doing is serving, the lunches where people come get them. So you're right. The schools, to me, are the big wild card here. They don't even know yet they don't know for sure what they're going to do anyway. So it's kind of hard to plan for it, right? So you're right. There's that. And what Chelsea was saying a minute ago is important everybody understand. We actually do have 2 bites of the apple here. We're going to pass some budget June 13th. But at the fall town meeting, it can be adjusted. But as Chelsea said, if you've already spent it, you can't adjust it. So maybe you do the restrictive one June 30th, so you've got money to spend, and then you look at it again and decide what to do later. when you've got more information and we understand when this virus is going to come back and what the long-term impact is.
And am I correct in understanding, I think you said Mark was on, have all the union contracts been recently renegotiated, and are they all essentially on year one?
The vast majority are, because, we passed this past town meeting, there was like 3, I think there was 4. So I would say the answer is the majority were just passed. So I think we are in year 1 on the majority.
Okay.
I don't know about the schools, which of course is a big one too. So don't know about those. Well, if Mark and Brian are here, I can't tell. They may be using their cell phones. And I don't know what their phone numbers are. There's 2 people with cell phones. I don't know who they are. So I can't tell whether Mark and Brian are here.
Along the lines of what John said about, understanding what departments might actually have more need for funds to comply with COVID related restrictions. I definitely think it would be interesting to find out, to hear from the police and fire departments how the situation is impacting them, where they're first responders that have to respond to any scene. Are they seeing, a need? They have to buy more personal protective equipment. Have they been able to get that from somewhere else, et cetera, et cetera?
So I spoke to both chiefs this week. And I think that there's, and Brian can chime in here if I misrepresent kind of where they're at, but on the fire side, they are tracking what the COVID response needs have been in terms of finances. So they are tracking that. And I don't think that they have a response yet from FEMA on what will be reimbursable and what will not.
Okay.
And that's in terms of staffing and PPE equipment. And from a police perspective, the chief is still very supportive of having the 3 officers on a shift like he proposed originally, but not looking to add more than the 3 per shift.
And that would be that you get the 2 you hire 2 new full-time to get the 3.
Correct.
Yep. Okay, so Brian Ballantyne is on here. He's BB. I didn't realize it until just now. So he is in the audience. I just can't tell if Mark is there. There's 2 cell phone numbers there. One of them's probably him. Okay, one thing too that I'm surprised you guys haven't brought up is furloughs, layoffs. Furloughs being temporary, layoffs being not as temporary. So I've talked to Brian and Mark a little bit about this, and what I've been told is, well, what I understand, I've always understood, is that most businesses in the private sector pay into a fund in their state, the unemployment fund. They pay in a % of their employee salaries. The first $15,000 is what you pay in Massachusetts. So this fund builds up, and then when one of your employees needs to draw unemployment because they've been laid off or fired, it comes out of basically your share of that. And then if you use too much of it, they increase your tax rate. So obviously a lot of tax rates are going to increase in the next year or so because of all the unemployment. The town doesn't participate in that. They don't pay in this money to the state unemployment fund like taxable businesses do. But you can draw unemployment if you are laid off or furloughed from town government, but the town has to pay a piece of what is drawn. But it's not 100%. It's my understanding it's 25%. And I assume Brian will raise his hand if I'm saying this wrong. So it's not the full thing. So I also think that maybe one of the things that does need to be considered is furloughs and layoffs, especially furloughs, temporary thing where it looks like people would be whole with the unemployment that's being drawn. Now, it's actually very generous in Massachusetts. Many people are drawing more than what they actually earned when they were employed. So I still think that's got to happen. We got to look at that at some point. Possibly moving people around, the people who aren't doing as much as they were doing because they can't. They need to be physically present, maybe shifting things around. So I don't know that there's been a lot of focus on that because there's been so much else to focus on. But I think we need to look at that too, as far as, again, coming to our conclusion as to philosophically what we think should be recommended to town meeting. And again, the starting point is 2.46%. So we're not in bad shape. That's actually a very reasonable year-over-year increase. It's a little bit above inflation, but not much. So it's not like we're starting with a bad number. The question is just, you just want to drive it down even lower than that. If you went the 0% year-over-year increase, you'd be negative. Remember, the big increase in the budget this year is on the town side. The schools basically saved us with what they proposed. So when you average it all together, it's a reasonable rate of increase. But if you stripped out the town, it'd be a lot more. So if you reduce that town down to 0 or 2, that year over year is going to go down a lot. John?
Question, Kathy. And I profess I have not reviewed the attachments that you've sent out. So again, this may be answered in there. As a result of this, the situation we now find ourselves, how is that impacting our local receipts and the town revenue? In other words, is there a marked decline in some of the town's anticipated revenue, which we can anticipate to go at least through the end of 2021, that we really was not on the decision tree when we were talking about budgets and what seems like years ago, but it wasn't. In other words, has this pandemic impacted, or how will it impact our revenue?
So the answer is, it's kind of a tale of two cities. 6/30/20, we don't expect to see much impact. The biggest source of that is car excise taxes. And of course, the big slug of that comes in the spring when you get your annual bill on something that you've owned, not a new car. So the decrease, if there's any, would be on anything bought lately, but it takes a while to generate that excise tax anyway. You don't get the bill the minute you buy the car, right? During the year, you get it a few months later. And so the cars that were bought pre-virus, say pre-3/15, we would probably get that before 6/30, but anything that would have been bought after that probably would have rolled over to next year anyway, as far as collections. So it's expected to hit fiscal year 21, the year we're working on as far as budget, more than the current year. So the current year will probably still close out pretty well.
Okay.
Also, given that Mark and Brian have asked departments to please don't spend money you don't need to spend. Don't spend it just because it's in your budget. So for example, the schools have said they do expect to return some money this year. They didn't return anything last year, but they are expecting, because they really have saved some money with this, with the schools being closed, right? So they're expecting to return some money. So I think we're okay for 6/30/20 as far as having a year where we end up generating a pretty good slug of free cash that gets us started on our budget 2 years from now. But it's the next year that there's probably going to be an impact, which is why Brian has reduced the estimate of local revenue on the budget you're going to look at, that I just emailed to you. So he's reduced it by $165,000 as far as what he's projected.
And does that take into account the reduction from state funding as well? Or is it?
Yes, he reduced it in two pots. He reduced local revenue first, and then he reduced local aid, which is what's coming directly from the states. So he's just assuming that the state's going to have to reduce something, given how much money they're having to spend, given, you've got a senator going to let him go bankrupt. You've got a big fight right now in Washington as far as whether to give the states money. You got the Dems saying give them more money. You got the Republicans saying, I don't think so. Let them go bankrupt. I'm being a little bit crass, but that's kind of what's going on. So I don't know if Charlie Baker has got an idea of how this ends up. He does have a big rainy day fund or stabilization fund that they definitely will be drawing on. There's no doubt about that. But whether it's big enough to cover the hole that they're going to have with everything they've had to do for this virus, I don't know. I was on a business call a week ago with municipal bond people. And these are people who are on the buy side. They're not selling bonds. So they represent investors that buy muni bonds as part of their investment portfolio. And he absolutely raised the alarm on what they call general obligation bonds, because of all the pressure that states are going to have to pay all these additional expenses they have. Unemployment alone is a huge number. Now, apparently they're going to borrow that money from the Fed to cover that. But yeah, so long-winded answer is Brian Ballantyne does expect to take a hit on local aid, and he definitely expects to take a hit on local revenue.
And I apologize. I would have had that answered, I suspect, had I read the attachments that you
I
sent.
don't think so. No, I don't think so. No, you shouldn't apologize. So I just sent the spreadsheet with all the budget adjustments in it, literally, 15 minutes before the meeting started. So no, you didn't have a chance to look at that.
But Kathy, is it correct though that whatever loss in revenue is projected is more than made up for in the cuts that are projected?
Well, I'd say this, Tim, instead of what you just said, as Chelsea well knows, the local revenue number is estimated at a really, really conservative number. And it's done so because we are trying to always preserve the ability to generate what we call free cash. That is, always have money left over at the end of a fiscal year when you close it out, which means that your starting point for 2 years after that, once that number's been certified, it basically is money in the bank that you start out with. So that's what it would impact, is the amount of free cash. But by Brian doing what he has done, which is reduce the estimated local aid and estimated local receipts by what he is, he probably has hopefully preserved our budget surplus that we try to have year after year, and give us a good amount of money to start the fiscal year, the next fiscal year after that one on. So maybe some of this will also be offset by operating budget reductions, but the operating budget reductions that are proposed are going to be for fiscal year 21. The impact of reducing the local receipts and local aid will be on fiscal year 22. So it's not direct. Chelsea, anything you want to add at this point?
I mean, like I said, I did review some of the individual departments, and I think, to go back to some of maybe John's and Tim's points from before, is I don't think that we should kind of go at this at a specific percentage decrease to come up with a specific number. I think it makes sense for us to look at the current situation that we're in, and do we have opportunities here to, for example, Youth and Family Services is looking for their person. We obviously have employees who are not being fully utilized in the current environment, and do we want to see if we can reallocate and move some funding around by different budgets to get Youth and Family what they need, if we think they need it now, and still, preserve somebody who's already in the system, with a job and isn't able to fully do their job.
Yeah, Chelsea, that is a brilliant idea in terms of, like you said, there are some that are unable to do their job based upon the circumstances, but if there are voids in existing departments that can do this work but can't do it just based upon manpower, that vacuum should be filled like on the same day, at least in my opinion.
So just again, to keep in perspective what a 2.46 tax rate increase means to the average household, which is a house that is worth $635,000, it's $260 year over year as far as the absolute dollar amount of tax increase. So it's not bad. So I'd still tell you that our bigger problem is the next 5 years. It's not fiscal year 21. So I don't know what $260 means to the average family in this environment. So I'm not going to try to pretend I do. It may mean a lot. It may not mean as much. It may mean a lot to only a couple, a few people, but not a lot to everybody else. So everybody's just going to have to kind of look at this as far as how they look at the world and decide whether 2.46 really is pretty good. And then we really spend more focus on the impact in the next 5 years.
So I think on that specific example, Kathy, I think it might make sense for us to take a position on that. So at least when the Board of Selectmen meet tomorrow, they know that that's the direction that we're going on to reallocate, at least for that specific position, and if there's any others. So that way they know that's their direction that we're going in.
I would agree with you if I knew what I thought for sure, but I don't. And that's why I'm having trouble today saying, let's vote on whether we're happy with 2.46, or whether we really do want to incorporate some version of the 2%, 0%, something in between. I mean, we don't have to stick with what they've done. We can go through it and pick and choose what we think. So I'm not there yet. And that's why I'd have trouble voting today. I mean, if the other 6 want to vote, that's fine. But I'm not there yet.
Kathy, maybe I'm on mute. Am I on mute?
No,
No.
I can hear you.
Question, the 2.46 that you mentioned, that budget, that the effect of that is not a significant or any reduction in the town services that are going to be delivered?
No,
Would-
it's not. And it's
yeah.
got all the people, and it's got 2 policemen, it's got 1 youth and family services. It's got the half person for Tom. And
Right.
so no, there's no impact on services. That's just our normal budget.
Okay,
So that's where we would have ended up if we didn't have a virus and we kept meeting. And the changes that I described at the first had taken place. So Norfolk would have happened on its own. We ended up knowing there was only 1 student instead of 2. That was nothing anybody did to it. It just was what ended up being the fact. So most of those changes I described would have happened anyway. I think EDC probably would have gone ahead and reduced their budget. Now, the library might not have re-voted their budget. They did that as a result of the request to do the 0 and 2. They just went ahead and voted and said, this is what we want. We want to do, so they did 2%. Just so you know, in the budget right now, they've done a 2% year-over-year increase, which is the smallest increase I remember them ever having. So they voted on theirs. The Board of Trustees has said, that's what we want to do. So theirs is in the 2.46.
On the 0% versus the 2.64 or 46 or 2.64.
I believe it's 4.6. Andrew, let me check.
Okay.
Yeah, 4.6.
So if the town meeting is June 13th, and then in view of, I don't know if this is impacted by when you would need to print a warrant, etc.
They're not going to reprint it. It's printed. So they're just going to have to amend it from the floor as far as the budget goes. So the warrant that was printed, 2 months ago is what's going to be used.
Okay, so when do we need to vote on this by?
Soon, because the board of selectmen are going to know what we want to do. We want to know what they want to do, what they think is the right answer. So I'd say, if we can't vote next week, it's got to be the following week. But it'd be preferable to do it next week, because next week, the week after that is Memorial Day. Now, not that anybody's going to necessarily go anyplace, but it is Memorial Day week. So I prefer to see if we can't come to a meeting of the minds next week, so that we believe, and that's why I'm trying to give you all this today, to give you the background, so you've got kind of week to think about. And then, it's nothing wrong with 2 people at a time talking about the budget. If you need to talk about it with somebody, as far as what you think, you got questions, you can get questions answered between now and next Wednesday.
well, Kathy, I'm sorry to interrupt. And again, I should probably know the answer to this, but we already went through the exercise, did we not, of voting individual budgets a number of months ago? Is this now just the so-called like a wrap-up overall percentage we're going to vote on? Or have there been any additional changes other than the ones you mentioned early on as to the departmental budgets?
The ones I mentioned are the changes that have been made since we met and voted last. And if you remember where we were when we stopped meeting, the biggest issue that we still hadn't come to a final vote on was youth and family services, because I kept trying to get everybody there to vote. We'd have tie votes, whatever. So I wanted all 7 people to vote on that one, because everybody is very interested in that one. So we never came to an agreement on that one where we all voted. So that was still to finalize. Other than that, the things we had issues we had issues with, and we had voted on. And those issues have pretty much gone away with what is in front of us right now. So there's not a lot of difference between where we left off and where the board of selectmen are with this budget that is 2.46 year-over-year increase. So long answer to your short question. We did not vote department by department previously. We voted for the most part for the entire budget, and then we carved out certain things to talk about that we knew were controversial. So this time, the plan is to, unless we can't do it, is to vote on the entire budget as presented. And if we need to carve out something, we will. We can, and we'll do what we need to do to let you vote. Don't worry.
And capital is going to be held. The majority
No,
of capital-
there's actually quite a bit. There's not much left for the fall, just so you know. So when you look at this, take a look at the articles. So this is updated based on the capital planning committee last meeting. So it's very up to date. So Brian updated this on May 11th. So it's up to date. So there's very little capital, which may please you for the fall. It's basically the hook truck. So
Did we
vast
move the
majority of it is
hook truck up?
the hook. Are you saying we moved it up, Andrew?
Yeah, didn't we? Because so we can use it for the snow.
Oh, that's right. So I take it back. Karen convinced us the other night at our meeting that if we didn't vote for that now, she wouldn't be able to order it in time to use it for the snow. And then we kind of got sidetracked about talking about a program that we could have got some money from that we didn't. So yeah, so there's just very little left for the fall as far as what you saw before. So most of it is on the annual town meeting.
Did we ever get a ruling on the Finn boiler?
Well, if you mean ruling, do we really understand why they said they had to have it, and then they didn't say they had to have it, and now they say they have to have it as far as that? Because the answer I got the other night wasn't clear. It's my understanding that the reason they didn't want to consider it on this town meeting is because when they saw the budget from the state, the budget was more than what they thought it was going to be. So it sounded like it was going to cost us more. But then you heard what Mark said the other night. He said I was wrong, that wasn't the case. And so I'm not sure why it got taken off and then got put back. If there was a problem with the budget, because they haven't changed the number.
I thought it had to be done in the spring so that the
I
work
agree.
could be
That's
done in the
exactly what
summer.
they told us, but I'm telling you, it got taken off. They said they didn't want to do it because.
So then they're
now it's
bumping it to
back.
they're
Now
bumping it to the fall or next year? I don't
now
understand.
it went away. Now it's back. So now it's
Okay.
back
Yeah, it was
on
going to get bumped a couple years out, I think, was the conversation. And it had something to do, to Kathy's point, I think it was along the lines of when the price they got back from the state was, 30 or 40% higher than what they thought it should be, and what they got for quotes, or I don't know what the exact thing was. So even if we didn't get the funding from the state, it would still cost us the same amount of money, but we could, hold off a little bit and we didn't have to do it immediately or something along those lines. And then it came back that it was something different and that wasn't what it was intended. And so it was just a little bit up in the air.
So it's on there right now, Tim. Yeah, so I will try to get a little bit more information on that one, because I definitely didn't, either I didn't understand what was being said recently, or it was confusing. One of those two things.
Do we have, I don't know if this is probably a question for Brian, do we know when we're going to find out if people have missed their quarterly tax payments? I think we extended the deadline, right? And I wasn't sure when that comes up.
It's extended to June 1st, but you don't have to pay interest to June 30th. So it's a good question. So I just checked that he could talk. Whoops, I got the wrong person. Wait.
Hey, Andrew, when you ask, do we know, you're not looking for the names or lists, you're looking just for.
No, just so if to Kathy's point, if June 1st is the deadline, or really it's June 30th because you don't pay interest until then. So I guess sometime in July we'll know, okay, 10% or 5% or 50% of our, quarterly tax revenue did not come in.
Hello?
Hey, Brian.
Can you hear me? Okay, can you hear me now?
Yep, we can hear you.
Yeah, no, it'll be, and that you're exactly right, Andrew. It'll probably be like July-ish, because
Okay.
the due date now is June 1st, so it's hard to tell right now. I
Yeah.
don't expect it'll be a huge number, because about half of it is escrow paid, and that's already in the, that's already done. So
Yeah, you already paid into that.
but you're right. It'll be about July.
Okay.
Good for those banks, Andrew.
we're not having a lot of mortgage defaults right now, actually. So
That's great.
that's why I'm saying most people are paying their escrow payments right now. I'm not sure how much from a tax revenue there it's going to affect us that much, but I guess in July the numbers will tell.
And what that's going to do, I think, and Brian, correct me if I'm wrong, I think that again will just influence the free cash that's for 6/30/20. So we may have less free cash than we would have if everybody had paid on time.
Now, Brian, if free cash gets certified in the end of June or July, right? If we had to, could we vote at a fall town meeting and use that in current fiscal year if we needed to?
You could. It won't get certified until at least the end of August because it's
Okay.
that's usually the earliest we can do it. More likely September. So
Okay.
in a pinch, possibly yes.
Hey, Brian,
just
one question I asked when you weren't there speaking is the impact that you expect to see vis-a-vis revenues as a result of the pandemic. Is there? I assume there's a lot of chatter out there among municipalities. Do you have any say? Will it be primarily in the excise tax revenue, or are there other areas where you're expecting a drop in revenue?
Well, the biggest areas is the excise and, transfer station stickers, investment income. Those three kind of pots are just monetarily, they're the biggest.
Yeah.
Usually. Investment income's really not now, but
Right.
so that is one thing that's being indirectly affected. But excise, I don't know yet because we have a
Yeah.
lot of leases in town.
Yeah.
Our pool is a lot of leases, so those are a little more insulated. But it's a big question, John. So I don't know. I don't think it's going to be drastic, but I do think there's going to be definitely some impact.
And when you mentioned lease, so if you have a leased vehicle, you do not pay an excise tax to the resident municipality?
No, you do, but the lease company pays it and then they collect from you. So
Right.
they'll go ahead and pay it and then
Okay.
hope that you're going to pay it.
Right.
Hmm.
So we're gonna, the answer to your question is we're gonna have to watch that. And,
Yeah.
And that's a good fall discussion for sure.
Thanks, Brian.
Sure.
So Kathy,
Nelson.
I would like to make a motion to get what this committee, to see if this committee would like to give some direction on the Youth and Family Services position. Because I do think it's important that if we do have an opinion that we talk about it here and make it known so that we don't run out of time before town meeting. So I'd like to motion that we task Mr. Purple with identifying, filling the Youth and Family Services position with current staff that are not being fully utilized and may not be for the foreseeable future,
The entire position.
or part of it.
Okay.
Do you want me to change my motion?
No, I just want to make sure I understand that what you know. So yeah, why don't you do it again and fill the whole thing, and if not, what can they fill?
Well, do we want to add something that says we're not supportive of the add of the position, and instead we want to replace that with a, move or a partial move of an existing resource, just because it's kind of.
Yeah.
Do you want to do
They're
that
asking
before we
for
get
a
the
resource.
answer about whether they can do it?
Yeah, another question I have, Chelsea, before I think I could vote on that is the Youth and Family Service position, I think expects or anticipates someone with a particular skill set to carry out their mission. And I'm just wondering whether or not that skill set is such that it would not easily be adaptable to just someone who may have some additional time on their hands. I don't know the answer to that. And I think we need, at least I'd like to hear back from Youth and Family as to whether that would serve their needs. It's great motion. I just don't know if it's timely or if it's too early.
I was under the impression that this was administrative help.
Okay,
Am I wrong?
That was my impression. It's an admin assistant title.
Yeah, it's like a receptionist to let people in and escort
Okay.
them to the rooms, I think.
Answer the phone.
so I just wasted 2
Yeah,
minutes
that's
of
okay.
everyone's time by.
Is that Andrew Dennington?
No, I think what Chelsea is suggesting is a good idea. This is just getting some more information, right?
Yeah, that's
Okay,
all. We're
because-
asking him to see what he could do. When he looks at people who may not have a, full set of responsibilities right now because they can't. What they normally do is just not being done right now. Whatever they're in charge of is not being done. So I don't see any downside to this. He may come back and say, there's nobody. I looked at it and it doesn't work, but I see no downside in asking him. Let me just add this too, though, as we talk about this one position. So I am associated with the Friends of the Southborough Youth Commission, which is the 501c3 that supports the department. So all I can say is there is a whole lot of need right now to help people in this town that's coming through that group. So this probably is not the time to cut back for sure. And this may give more support to they really need somebody because there's a lot going on over there right now.
And I would hate to approve a new position when we already have people who are on our payroll and can't do their job. So I just think it makes sense from a practical standpoint.
Yeah, and it's somewhat maddening, Kathy, your comment insofar as I know there are many, many residents in town who have reached out to indicate a willingness to help out, volunteer if needed, and there's just been nothing coming back to those individuals. So if there is a need there, we need to know about it, and because I do think we can get some boots on the ground.
I agree with that too. Okay, so the motion on the table is to ask Mr. Purple to kind of survey the town to see if he would be able to fill either all or part of the proposed new position at Youth and Family Services with an existing employee who has had their duties truncated, temporarily reduced because of the virus.
Second.
Any further discussion?
My only part would be, I don't know why we're, only looking at the youth and family position. I would say that's a blanket statement for any position that needs to be filled.
Well, probably, Andrew, because it's, it's newly proposed. It's a new one. You can't ask people to be police officers, right? So this is one where you could use probably other people to fill it. So just because it's the new full-time position being proposed.
It is our only new general admin position, right?
Yeah, I mean, you're not going to ask, just anybody to do Tom LaFlamme. He's got to have a specific qualified person. Obviously, Chief Policy has to have qualified people. So this is one where you might have the best shot at finding somebody already on the payroll to do. I think it's probably the answer to your question. And it's the new one. So before we add a new one, let's see if we can feel it.
All right, then I'm good with the motion.
Right. So now the way this works is we've got to actually say yay or nay. And so you just say your name in yay or nay. And so I'll start off with Kathy, yay.
Andrew, yay.
Pat,
Tim,
aye.
Tim, yay.
Rooney abstain.
Chelsea.
Chelsea, I.
Okay, sorry. So Andrew is taking minutes in case anyone wonders. Karen had agreed to take minutes through town meeting, so we've lost Karen Finelli.
So do we have Judy's vote?
Oh, Judy, I forgot. Judy, I don't see Judy. Judy?
And just while we're waiting for Judy, so people understand the basis upon which is that, there could be a conceivable impact on a family member, which if I voted one way or the other, I could get spit roasted. So that's the basis for the abstention. It's becoming a little bit more and more difficult, I think, in making sure I remain as objectively as I can. And I've been withdrawing or abstaining from as many votes that conceivably could impact that situation, Kathy.
Understood, John. So I'm not sure what's going on with Judy. I see her. It's not muted. So I don't know what her issue is. So we're going to go ahead. We've still, we've got 6. So Andrew, you've got a vote of, I guess, 5-0-2.
That's your two. Yep.
Okay. All right, but we still got it passed. Okay, so we'll get this information ASAP.
I'm going to bring up another area that I looked at, Kathy.
Okay.
So I looked at the assessor's budget and the current proposed, the 2% and the 0%. And as part of the original budget, there is a line item for overtime. They had a employee leave probably late last summer, early fall to go over to another department within the system. And that employee that went to another department has been training, and it's still in the FY21 budget to continue training the new employee that was hired in October of 2018 on overtime hours. And I reached out to Mr. Civelli to understand kind of why that line item is in his FY21 budget. And he responded that it is to continue the new employees training 2 hours a week overtime after this particular employee that's training is done at her regular job. My opinion is that if you've been in the job for 9 months, then I think we need to kind of move on and stop the training. And we're paying another employee overtime. I think that's something that we could look at cutting out of this budget. If the employee needs more assistance or training, then I think we should be looking within the department to provide that.
And Chelsea, correct me if I'm wrong, on his 2% and 0%, he did cut it out, right?
No, in his 2%, he reduced the number of hours. In his 0%, he cut it out.
Okay, so that's one of the first places he went when he had to try to come up with a revised budget.
Right. So I just want to see what everyone else's kind of reaction is to that.
Kathy, can you hear me now? It's Judy.
Now I can, Judy.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I don't know why. I'm not very good at this. On the
okay.
youth, in fact, I'm terrible at it. Youth and family, I think, is a special. I know you guys have probably moved on since then, but I think that's a really special case, and we have to be very careful not to tell them how to hire somebody. I can't remember how the motion was phrased. Find somebody else.
It was phrased as to ask Mark to survey the town and see if he could fill that position for the next year with someone who's already on the payroll that that's been affected as far as what they do. So I hear you, Judy, and this is not written in stone. Let's just see what Mark comes up with, and then we'll talk about it again.
Okay, well, I'm going to go down as a no on that.
All right, so let's revote this so we get this official. Okay, so motion on the table is to ask Mark to survey the town to see if there is anyone who's been affected by COVID that has extra time that could take on some or all of the youth and family services admin position.
Or consult with youth and family to see if there is someone. They have to have input into this.
Okay, go ahead. So we'll revise the motion to say to ask Mark Purple and Youth and Family Services.
Right.
Is that, Judy? Okay.
Right.
All right, that's the motion. Second?
Second.
All in favor, and we got to do a roll call again. So I'll start out with aye.
Aye.
Okay.
Okay, Bud's aye.
Okay.
Malinowski, aye.
Martell, aye.
John, you're on mute.
Rooney abstain.
All right.
All right.
And Andrew Dennington, Andrew Pfaff, the two Andrews answered at the same time. They both said aye.
6011.
This always gets so confusing when you get to vote. People hesitate thinking, and then they chime in at once.
So Kathy, would it be easier if you just called our name?
I can, and I've tried. I've been on other committee meetings that I've tried to figure out, because I said, does everybody see the same people? And you don't, apparently, in the same order, because you can do it that way, but you don't. So it doesn't work. So yes, I could do that. Tim, and I will. I didn't think we were going to vote on anything today, other than motion to adjourn. I wasn't worried about that one. So yes, Tim, I will call the people next time. Okay. So that's all I intended to do today. The real meeting is going to be next week. So my question is, what works for everybody given their new world and work schedule? Does Wednesday work again for next week? Maybe something around this time? We do it later
Works
too.
for me.
Okay,
Works
who
for
said
me.
that?
Yeah, that would be an evening meeting?
We could do it, we could do it 3:30, we could do it 5, we could do it 6, we could do whatever works for everybody.
Yeah, and I'm sure it's not the popular position, but I would prefer it later as possible because, I mean, I'm on these Zoom things almost 24/7.
I know, me too, John. I mean, over and over and over. So I'm going to look at Chelsea because she is home alone with 3 really small children. What works for you, Chelsea, next Wednesday?
Hold on one second.
Okay. Home alone.
Well, in the meantime, I can do anytime.
All right, Judy.
I'd
So-
prefer after 5 or 5:30 if we can, but
That should be fine.
Judy, why can't we see your face?
Because I'm shy, John. That's
Okay.
why.
Because
I think
Judy doesn't want us to see her face, so she called in instead.
No, the camera's just not. I can't get the camera and the microphone on any of my devices to work at the same time. So I just told Kathy I would call. I've been calling in school too. So that's why,
So-
John.
There's so many imposters out there. I just want to make sure it's you. It's really you.
I know,
Well,
Judy.
yeah.
There's such an interest in these meetings that anyone could be speaking on your behalf.
So we can test her who's going to be a grandmother soon.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Okay, so does 6 o'clock next Wednesday work for everybody?
Yes.
Yep.
yep.
Okay, all right, so I'll get the, okay. So everybody's got their homework between now and next Wednesday to.
Oh, sorry, can we go back to the assessor discussion?
Yes.
Because I think that might be one that we could talk about now. I mean, my personal opinion is that we should be able to do our job within 9 months of taking the job, and we should be relying on our departments within the department and not be paying overtime to accomplish that.
And the other way to do it is to let he or she work 38 hours at their new job and come over there for 2 hours. So it's paying the overtime that bugs me more than doing what she's doing.
Yeah, I'm fine if we want to append our budget approval to the new number. See how much what's the incremental there, Chelsea?
I think it's 4,900. Hold on a second.
So Chelsea, will you come up with a firm number and we'll make sure that that's part of what we do next week?
Yes.
And maybe have another
Kathy,
conversation between then.
Do we have a estimate from selectmen or whoever is going to make the on the floor motion for the budget on when they're going to have a draft of that? Because I think that's what we actually have to vote on, right? The motion they're going to
As
bring
far
on the
as I
floor.
know, there's no estimate when that is going to be ready because they haven't decided, for sure what we're doing yet.
What
So
they're
I
gonna do,
don't
right.
think so, Andrew. If they've gotten that far, I'd be surprised.
Okay.
All right, guys. So motion to adjourn.
Oh, okay.
Should we do public comment first?
Yeah, okay, sorry. Yes. So any public comment from our attendees?
Claire's raising her hand.
Claire, yep, so there's one.
Oh, hi. Can you
Hi.
hear me?
Hi, Claire.
Hi. Very interesting. I just have one question. Kathy, back when in the advisory, the advisory used to post all of the budgets. And I have looked on the town website. I can't find any updated. I did find the warrant, but that has the old numbers in them.
Yeah.
I'm fairly internet savvy, so I don't
Yes,
think.
you are. Well, being internet
So the
savvy,
question,
being,
the question is who's or how do we go about getting a copy? Is it through advisory? Is it through the finance committee? Or what's the proper procedure? Send an email to everybody and say, we really need access to this. Because there's a few things that I looked at that I have questions. I'm not going to bring them up at this meeting, but that I have questions on, and I can write them and send them to you guys, which is fine. But I think that we've always, with the exception of the last few years, we always had access to the budgets and the changes.
Okay, so this is what's happened, Claire, since you were those few years ago. So as you recall, when you were in advisory years ago, we had a separate budget. We had, what I call the John Butler spreadsheet, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And Brian Ballantyne would not only have his workbook that we see today, we would ask him to maintain, we designed it, or John designed it, and we would send it to Brian, and he would have to update ours as well as his. We also, as you know, posted all of our documents to Shutterfly. We had a website set up, and that's where we did everything, our emails, everything. Roll the clock forward, we ended up with a couple people on advisory that did not like Shutterfly for various reasons, and in some part because they didn't understand how it worked, and so we're having trouble trying to maintain it.
Right.
And we didn't have John Butler to maintain the spreadsheet. I didn't want to do it anymore. You weren't there. So we decided we were going to use Brian's spreadsheet. So we only had one. And so Brian would tell you, every other day I say, can you send me a new one? Can you send me a new one? So you're right. It's not posted any place. What we've got to start doing is advisory is going to have to find a place to post on the town website. And you can do that. I just haven't done it yet. Shutterfly got shut down this past year. Shutterfly's gone. We finally shut it down. So we do need a place so we can post our documents so that when people want to see what you just described, it's there, at least the most current version of it. So you're right, we should, and we have it.
Kathy, one other thing that is close in with Claire's inquiry, I just got a message. I suspect it's from Tom that says no public comment is available next Wednesday. So I don't know if that's as a result of this medium, or whether or not we should reconsider a different date.
Well, it's because, John, you can only do, I think, 2 at a time. So there must be 2 meetings already scheduled that have taken the public comment ability. So you can have a meeting, you just can't do public. You can only do this Zoom subscription only allows 2 at a time. So they must already be spoken for. And I think we're probably going to need some public comment. So I wish, Tom, can you come on? I think you can.
Yes.
So am I right about why we can't?
Yeah, so we have 2 rooms, one of which has the ability to have public comment. Another committee had previously booked that room, a couple weeks ago, basically. So I was just looking at the calendar as you were having that discussion. So
do you know what time that meeting is?
It is at 6:30 Wednesday night.
Okay, so we could leave it the way it is and not have public comment, which is legal. It just means that, for example, Claire couldn't have talked today. Well, Claire, we want to be able to talk.
That's one way of shutting me up.
We could change the time, or we could change the date. I don't want to do Tuesday because I assume the board of selectmen are either going to meet or, they may not. I want to leave that open for them so that we don't interfere with that. So it'd have to be either a different time on Wednesday or Thursday.
Thursday works for me.
As I say, for reference, Thursday is wide open at the moment.
Yeah, Thursday's fine with me.
Chelsea?
I think that's fine.
Tim? Tim, you're muted, but I think you said yes.
Thursday, the
I
21st.
read your lips. Thursday, a week from tomorrow, which would
21st.
be
21st, yeah.
21st, yeah.
I'm wide open.
All right, so Tom, Thursday,
All right.
6 o'clock.
Yeah. Just put the request in and I'll get it set up for you.
Okay, I'll do it quickly before somebody else takes it. Okay, so next Thursday, 6 o'clock, Zoom meeting, we will return here. I don't know about you guys, but I get my day so mixed up with,
Yeah, every day is Monday to me.
it's just like, I have no idea what day it is because you're off your routine so much. Okay. All right, so motion to adjourn?
I move we adjourn.
Seconded.
Okay, so Judy said yes, and I believe Andrew seconded it. At least I heard his voice.
Yeah.
Andrew Pfaff. I think we had two, but Andrew Pfaff. He's got a louder voice. Okay, all in favor of adjournment. So I will do the roll call. Andrew Dennington,
Aye.
Chelsea Malinowski, Tim Martell,
Aye.
Andrew Pfaff,
Aye.
John Rooney,
I,
Judy Betts,
Aye.
Kathy Cook, aye. All right, guys. So I'll see you next Thursday. And if you want to talk about anything in between, give me a call.